But before we get into it, just wanted to have you introduce yourself, let the audience know a little bit about you, anything that you feel like you'd like to share.
My name is Vicky. I have been married for 42 years. Excuse me.
Shout out to that. 42 years.
Yeah, I have 4 grown children. They're all happily married, and I have 7 grandchildren who all live within a 15-minute radius of our home.
That's awesome.
So we have a very close-knit family, and I am so blessed by that. There is nothing better than to have that.
That's awesome.
Is that good enough?
Yeah, I know. So 42 years of marriage. First of all, shout out to that. 42 years of marriage, 4 grown kids who are happily married, 7 grandkids. I mean, like I said, that in of itself is success. It's mecanage because you're hard pressed to find people who are happily married, especially, within one family. So it's like,
Yeah.
what's going on, Natty La La? It's good to see you, sister.
What is having that noise?
Huh?
Is that people?
That's a hand clap.
Oh, you're doing that.
I'm doing that.
Okay, sorry.
You're like, wait, what's the special
Who's doing that? I've been thinking about this for a couple of days, and I went back to before I got married. And the home I grew up in was totally dysfunctional to the point where it was plain abusive constantly. And yet, in that mix, I learned that there were certain boundaries, and they were unhealthy, but they were boundaries. What I recognized was when I came into uh, being married, I just brought all those unhealthy boundaries and he brought all his unhealthy boundaries into this marriage. And I couldn't figure out why he didn't understand what was important in a family and vice versa. It was abusive in our home because I was brought up to believe that the man is supposed to take care of the woman and she is supposed to serve the man and lower herself so he can be lifted up. And it just is not healthy. There's nothing healthy about that. When you have marriage, 2 people come together and they're in an equal marriage. It required us to work on ourselves. A lot of recovery, a lot of counseling. It all added up. I just want to say, this is for my husband. I'm happily married now, and he's retired, and we're having a blast. And I would have never guessed that I could live in a home with loving kindness, generosity, somebody who really cares and wants to spend a lot of time with me, and also his grandchildren and children. And so the man I married is a very different man today. And so always wanting to know that we grow up and not necessarily want to bring those things that we have as boundaries into a marriage. Because we don't know they're dysfunctional until we hear the right way. I'm going to keep going because there's another thing I want to say. I didn't grow up in a very loving home. In fact, I never saw my mom be affectionate with my dad. I never saw them. I saw fighting, but I didn't see I love you. I heard my dad say it to my mom, but I never got the feeling that my mom really loved my dad. And so I brought that into the marriage. And Dad called me on it pretty early on. And I really had to do a lot of work to know how to receive love and then give it.
You would say that you were an emotionally unavailable woman early on in your marriage. How would you say being an emotionally unavailable woman impacted?
Oh, it impacted my husband naturally because he didn't feel loved. He couldn't feel loved because I couldn't love. I didn't know how. I knew abuse and I knew how to serve, but I didn't know how to embrace him and love him. I knew his heart. I always knew he was a good man. But our behaviors were really crazy, out of control. There's everything in our marriage. There wasn't just one thing. We had total dysfunction, total breakdown. And that was the best thing that ever happened to us, because then we had to get help. And once we were getting help, that's when things began to change. One of the things I recognized in early recovery is that I married Dan so he could take care of me. That was his purpose. Yeah. And I went to him and I was feeling so bad that I married him for that reason. And I apologized to him. And he said, "Don't feel too bad." And I said, "Why?" And he says, "Well, I married you for the same reason." That really made me mad.
At least you're honest. You know, it's interesting because today I see a lot of people sometimes who have this conversation about like, oh, men are selfish, they only think about themselves when it comes to relationships, or women are selfish and they only think about themselves. And I'm like, I think if both parties are being honest, most people come into a relationship for what they can get out of it. Like everybody, they may be looking for different reasons, but at the end of the day, it's like a man and a woman coming together aren't looking just for reasons to be selfless. Like they're usually getting something out of that dynamic. So it's like, can we just be honest about the fact that, yeah, there's maybe a little bit of selfishness on both ends. That's not to say that you don't learn to love each other more and learn to serve, but like you can't point the finger and also be guilty of the same thing. You know?
That's it'll remove the speck out of your eye
Right.
before you try to go to somebody else.
Absolutely. So again, guys, if you're on here, hit that like button. Show support to the show. We are talking about boundaries and marriage and just relationships in general. Again, I'm so excited to have my special guest here, Vicky, who has been married for 42 years, 4 grown children and 7 grandchildren, all happily married. So she has a lot of wisdom to offer regarding this topic. So, okay, so let's moving on. I think you really, first of all, it was really interesting that you acknowledged being emotionally unavailable because so often today, especially when I hear a woman talk about their ideal partner, usually the first thing that I hear is that like, oh, I want a man who is emotionally available. I want a man that can be there for me. I mean, I can't. I've lost track of the amount of times that I've heard women say that, but I've never really heard a woman stand up and say, I myself was the emotionally unavailable one. How would you say that women, because it can happen, but how would you say that women who are to a certain extent inherently emotional, how can they be raised to be emotionally unavailable? And how can they be aware if they themselves are emotionally unavailable women?
Wow, now that's a heavy question. Um, well, actually, I think I started to notice it that I didn't have normal emotions. If I was angry, I cried, but I didn't cry very often. I didn't know my own feelings, my own heart. I didn't know my motivations. And I remember in the beginning, as I began to really look at my side of the street, not his, I saw that I didn't know what I liked, what I wanted, what I needed. And it took a long time. I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
You know, where do you go? I just want to go wherever you go.
Yeah.
Or somebody say, "Well, how you feel?" Right? "Well, I'm okay." I remember waiting in the kitchen for Dan to walk in the back door and waiting to see what his face looked like so I knew how I felt too. And
Yeah.
so I was just mirroring other people and not knowing my own heart, my own self.
Very interesting.
Did I answer the question?
No, that makes sense. I mean, basically, you weren't in touch with yourself, and you're saying that went in and it impacted your husband, even though you were serving him,
Right.
right? Or you were doing what was modeled to him. He still something about the marriage to him still felt like it was incomplete because you weren't availing yourself to him as a woman.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And it would make him angry because he wanted that whole partner. And I liked his emotions. I mean, like, oh, look at, he loves me. I mean, he would do so many things to show me that he loved me. And all I could do were acts of service back. I didn't want to be affectionate. I didn't really like it when he was affectionate. It was like very unfair at the time. I was a victim and he was the bad one. And so that's how I perceived things happening. And then as I got healthier and said, oh boy, I have a 50% responsibilities in his
Yeah.
marriage. It's not him being bad. It's him even lacking the love that he really needed.
Mm. Wow, that's so yeah, like I said, that's so interesting because I oftentimes don't hear women talk about how they can be emotionally unavailable
No,
and how that can actually impact the relationship.
well, you can have all your friends. We do that with our relationships with other women.
Yeah, true.
And we will disclose and tell people how we feel. And yet, the person you're supposed to be telling is right next to you. And it's easy to have relationships with other women. Boy, come along to have a relationship with a man. It's kind of a different story.
Yeah, totally. You can't then see things the same way. Totally different. Okay, so I want to move on to the next question. You make some really good points. So kind of continuing just, with this idea of boundaries, what would you say that a lack of boundaries can look like in a relationship or in a marriage? Like what are signs that the relationship is lacking healthy boundaries?
One of the signs is I'm going to talk about myself was
Mhm.
fear. I was afraid to stand up for what I thought was right and true, and would accept unacceptable behavior.
Okay.
And I actually thinking, "Ooh, I'm good. I would never do what he did."
Okay.
So it was a prideful. I used to call it the inverted pride, and
Mm.
it's just a really difficult thing to start to realize I'm not all that really.
It's difficult to be humble.
Oh yeah,
It's difficult to be humble and accountable to your own.
it's really hard to admit. It's like, oh God, what am I doing?
Oh man.
Okay,
That's a good point.
did I make?
No, that's a good point. Yeah. So you said for you, it was living in a constant state of fear gave you an indication that something was off in your relationship.
Right. I wouldn't, I was trying for a word there and that word escaped me. To put myself into a situation with what I believed. And I didn't want to come up against his belief because his was louder than mine.
His beliefs were louder than yours?
His words were louder. His
Okay.
actions, his emotions were louder. So I grew up in a home where the dad had all the emotions, and I wasn't allowed to have anger or um. I had to take care of my mom's fear a lot.
Okay.
So as a caretaker, kind of, um, I watched my dad cry. I was actually envious of him later on in life because he could access his feelings. And then, but my mom was shut down. And I knew that when I was growing up, I was more like my mom. And as I got healthier, I began to see that my dad was a lot more honest. And part of that dishonesty that I had with my husband, it led him not to feel safe. And I would just like check out completely. If there was a crisis, I would just go somewhere else. I mean, my kids would watch it. They said, Mom just like went somewhere else. She's not in the room. She's not, being protective, or she's not there emotionally.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so again, being emotionally unavailable impacted your husband and then it impacted your kids. And then to a certain extent, because you weren't present, then it sounds like you weren't able to really establish healthy boundaries.
Exactly. You are exactly right. Because if you're not present, you don't know you are having unhealthy boundaries. It's more about self protection
Yeah.
than anything else. So then you can't risk loving somebody. Like if you're so fearful that, you're just trying just to live and take care of houses and kids and or work, that if you work daily, all that stuff, you're not really present when you get home. When you think about the house, the love, it's just not there because you're not there.
Okay.
I had to get in touch with my little self, actually, like through counseling little Vicky, and I realized little Vicky, really like to talk and
Right.
be in front of people. But before I got into that place of healing, I'm afraid to say my name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know everybody's shocked
Why are you able to say your name? I'm curious.
because my self-esteem was so low and I didn't know. I just felt everybody judged me all the time. And so I got to a place where I was very introverted and on anything but
Introverted. No, yeah, definitely not.
So,
Very interesting. Okay. No, good stuff. Again, guys, for those of you who are joining, like, if you those the show, you can find me on Cash App or Venmo Sade. Shout out to Darren with the 5 on the Cash App. I appreciate you. We got the sponsor of the week in the building. Thank you, Darren. You're always showing love and support. Also, guys, if you have any questions, be sure to drop it down in the comment section. So moving on to the next question. You hit some really good points about how being emotionally unavailable and really being unhealthy and unable to take accountability for whatever's going on with you, how it can impact your relationship and ultimately impact your kids.
yeah,
So who would you say in a relationship, who would you say is responsible for establishing healthy boundaries?
both. Definitely.
Okay.
Both. It's not something one person can do. I mean, you may be a little bit ahead one week, but he could be ahead the next week. I mean, as you get to know yourself and look at, well, is this a healthy boundary? You know, in the house that I grew up, oh man, that was not a healthy boundary.
Yeah.
And then because of that, I didn't want to have my children growing up like I did. So then I had to exert myself into the relationship and actually say, this is my boundary. And that itself then taught my children they could have boundaries and they could get even healthier than and I. And I think that's why their marriages are so much better. It's pretty much everybody was healing the whole time they were growing up.
Yeah. Well, and what's great about the example that you gave is it's not like, they didn't see you guys not be perfect.
Oh,
I mean, they saw
everything.
yeah, the good and the bad
I love it.
in the middle and so they saw the process of you doing everything wrong and being emotionally available and the disconnect and whatever trauma or abuse came from that. They experienced that and then also experienced that you guys both personally take individual responsibility for your mess and how that over time was able to transform.
Yes.
Yeah.
And owning your own stuff. When something's wrong with you, something's wrong with you. And a lot of people want to blame the other person. The shame blame game. It does not work. It is hurtful. It is destructive. We had to own our own feelings, our own belief systems. I knew what I didn't want to be like, but I didn't know what I wanted to be like. What did it look like for me?
Yeah.
And each person has to go through that period of time where they have to decide, who do I want to be in my marriage, in my friendships, and especially with your children. And the kids are watching all the time. So
Yeah.
if one of us, if I'm blaming him, they're learning how to blame. If I'm shaming him, they're learning how to shame. And it's not healthy. There's nothing healthy about shaming your children or blaming them in a way that is destructive by calling them stupid, stuff like that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So again, the power of individual responsibility that cannot be overstated. Uh, okay, so you made the point that it is up to each person to establish their own boundaries. It is up to each person to take responsibility for their part in there being a lack of boundaries. And then even based upon the things that you note, it's like even if you come to a place where you recognize like the relationship that you're in, it doesn't have boundaries. You can still take steps to try to repair that.
Exactly. And you never quit growing. You never, ever. I'm still learning. He's still learning. And that's why our marriage has gotten so much better. And I just yearned for loving kindness. That was the thing I never saw. And now I live in it. But I have to admit, it is a very spiritual walk. It's not just reading self-help books. I needed to get down. I needed to ask God to forgive me and for God to give me a way to behave that was healthy and that's loving. Um, there's a scripture that I love. Uh, um, it talks about boundaries. Um, it says boundary lines fall in pleasant places. And for me, I would think falling from heaven, but it was pleasant for Dan and it was pleasant for me. And that's when you feel safe. That's when you risk. And without that scripture, I couldn't quite. I thought the boundary was like, I'm to make everybody happy. And then my little part over here was I should be happy because they're happy. It was,
That's codependent.
yeah,
That's codependent.
yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah. So then what would you say were some of the active steps that you had to take practically to start to try to enforce boundaries? I know you said step one was actually acknowledging that
Right,
you didn't have any and that you had a part to play in the lack of boundaries
right.
that were negatively impacting your marriage. What were other steps that you had to take to start to rebuild those?
Oh, well, for me, a lot of it was about writing. Um, writing got me into my own head, into my own belief system. And I'm a Christian and also the Bible, because the Bible really speaks about truth. I got to say it. Jesus said 77 times, I tell you the truth. So I had a role model in that said, I tell you the truth. I have to tell my kids the truth. I have to tell my husband the truth. And I have to know my own truth in order to tell somebody what it is. So it's really a deep search into your own self. It's not selfish. It's the only thing that you can do to help yourself grow. And that somebody else can't make you grow. No one else can do it. You have to do it for yourself.
No, good.
Ouch.
Cool. Yeah. Now you think you have to look at yourself in the mirror and you can't blame your problems on everyone else anymore. That won't work.
Mm-mm.
Um, so what would you say is, again, going back on this topic of boundaries for like a new wife or even a woman who's embarking in a new relationship? What would you say is like one thing that she should know as she is trying to grow in man or figure out, is this man my husband? Or she would say she is married and they're establishing like, what would you say is one thing that they should know?
Yes, that's a good question.
Yeah.
That question I like. Um, you cannot expect your husband to meet all your needs. It is the number one thing. It puts all the pressure on another human being. And, when you have two broken people, I just made this visual early on. If a person has a broken back and you have a broken back, you can't tell somebody to carry you because they have a broken back.
Yeah.
So you can't, it's not like that. The, this is hard. Ask me the question again. I changed it in my head.
No, no, you're good. It was, what's one thing that you would tell every new wife that you?
Yes. Okay. So what really began to help too was um this little like in triangle. Yeah, really, it was a really big thing for me. In the beginning, I put Dan on the top of the triangle. God was off to the side somewhere, and then me. And what I learned was if I went to to God with my needs, it was amazing how many times God would then empower Dan to meet my needs over here, and vice versa. If Dan was on the top, needs didn't get met. And recognizing that most of the time my needs were for me to take care of myself.
Yeah.
The true thing is needs are not somebody else's responsibility. You can share them. You can tell somebody what you want, what you think you need.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's not their job.
So it's not the job of the husband to fulfill every need of his wife.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's very, very true.
Very interesting. As you say that, okay, this kind of brings me to another question because something I hear common, I actually heard this more recently, is that this idea of like, especially for women who maybe they maybe wait a little longer to get married, or they have a career or whatever. And, there's this common belief that, unless this man is adding to my life, or unless he has all these different qualities intact, then I'm not going to be willing to marry.
Mhm.
Because it's like, at this point, my life is so good. And these are things that I've heard. I don't know how true it is.
Right.
But the things that I've heard is like, okay, look, let's say I have a good career, I have a house. Unless he has a better career and two houses and a car and can also meet all of me here emotionally, what's the point of this emotional labor, right? And it's this idea, the tension that I hear between, in one instance, women who maybe they say they're successful in their career, saying, what's the point of emotionally laboring with a man if he can't meet me here? But my question with that, as I've really thought through the ideology, is just like, is there ever going to be any relationship you can get in, even if you're mature, where there's not going to be some form of emotional labor? Is there ever going to be that perfect person where it's like, okay, I waited 10 years to get married, and he's here and I'm here and we can meet each other? Or is there always going to be, what, you have a broken ankle, I have a broken wrist, and we learn to make it work?
Right.
You know?
That's exactly it. That's the whole point, is that, early on when we got married, they talk about iron sharpening iron. We weren't doing that. We were just
You were just sharpening it, hurting each other.
doing it.
Not even hurting each other.
Wasn't working. It didn't work. And I had a counselor who said that to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's just so real. And learning that honesty, that what is the reason you're getting married? Do you really love this man? And yes, he's going to meet your needs, but he's not going to meet all your needs. And it's not his job. I keep going back to, it's not somebody else's job to meet all your needs.
I mean, that right there.
That's
right there.
So many women make these lists of what they want in a man. And then they can't find him. Where is he?
Literally, I literally earlier today, I was listening to a podcast. It was a therapist and a larger influencer. And they kind of came to the point of, what if you do all this work? You have a job, you eat healthy, you buy a house, whatever, you do all this work. And at the end of you doing this work, this man isn't there. And what they concluded was that, okay, that dream man isn't there because there was a shortage. But there was never a conversation of like, maybe that dream man isn't there because a dream man never existed.
That's right. You're right. I mean, seriously? The other thing is, we think we know what we need. Not only do we not know our needs, but we think we know what somebody else has for me. And, I'm sorry, I got to go back to the word. No eye has seen, no mind has conceived. We don't know what we need. We don't know. And so to come up with this perfect list, and that person can have that, but guess what? Your needs might not ever be met by this man, this list of this man. Because it's not really, I think God brings people together so we can work things out together and become better. Both of us become better.
So then would you say that the idea that I'm waiting for my dream man, I'm not going to settle. The amount of times I've heard that, I mean, do you think that that's real? Or do you think some of that's based upon fantasy? I mean, if someone was to come to you and say, I've done all my work and I guess men just aren't good enough. Men just don't measure up.
Wow. That's really sad. It's that it is. I mean, I remember telling my mom, I will never marry a blonde-haired, blue-eyed man. What did I do? Married blonde-haired, blue-eyed man. I decided when I'd been previously married, I had a 5-year-old son, and I decided I didn't want to marry a person like I did the first time. So I waited 5 years because, if you wait 5 years, you won't repeat it, which is a total lie.
So
I heard on the radio one day, oh, good, I'll get a brand new man if I wait for 5 years. And there is so much more behind the surface of a human being and what they do. I knew when I met my husband. I knew the day after our first date, I was going to end up in marriage.
You knew right when you met him.
I knew there.
Okay.
I knew it. It was like I knew that I knew that I knew, and he wasn't in a hurry to get married, but I already knew we were going to get married. So, I just kind of enjoyed that time. And then when it was time, and it came, and he brought me that ring, and I was like, I'm afraid of it, because now I have to be real, and now I have to be risking and committing to this human being who's not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't perfect. Between the two of us, we were a mess. We were a full-on mess, seriously. And everybody doubted that we were going to make it.
Oh, really? I didn't know that one.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know if people doubted if you guys were going to make it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember sitting in a room with the counselor with Dan, and he was just being Dan, kind of criticizing and attacking at the same time. And I'm just like, and the counselor said, that's not a way to treat your wife. And I'm just pulling her pigtails. And it's how he interacted with me. It was like, you thought he was funny. And I'm sitting there going, learning how to communicate is essential. And having the language that you know what you mean when you say something like, I'm feeling very lonely today. Well, am I telling him that he is supposed to meet my needs to be lonely, or am I just telling him, as a matter of fact, I'm feeling lonely? And it's not his job. It's just something I would like someone to say, oh, that's too bad. Is there something we can do about it? Or, not expecting, again, somebody else to meet your needs. It's like, I feel like I'm going around and around.
No, but it's a big point. It's a big point because a lot of the topics of discussions that I hear today as it relates to relationships and marriage is how accurately can this person meet my needs? And if they can't meet my needs, then they're not valid. And
wow, that's good.
Yeah.
That was really, really good what she just said. You're not valid. If nobody meets your needs, they're not valid. And that's a lie from the pit of hell.
Because no one was ever meant to meet
all your needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was never, you're not created. Your heart's not created for that. People think they go, oh, there's 50% of him, and then now I'm whole. You are whole without a man, and a man is whole without a woman. The thing is, you bring 100% of yourself. He brings 100% of himself. And then you become whole. That's really the key,
Very interesting. Yeah, no, definitely interesting.
When I have picked Dan, everything I thought I wanted did not present in him that I could see. I mean, just even the physical looks, don't get me wrong. The first thing I said to my husband is, you look exactly like my son. And and for some reason, that's not naturally what I was drawn to. But when we started having conversations, there was a chemistry there that was so strong. And I found him fascinating. One of the things that I really wanted in a husband, that he was very intelligent. That was just such an important thing for me. And then I married one, and, so he's an engineer and I'm an artist. So I'm big picture, and he is detailed. So detailed. And so trying to reconcile those things were difficult. But the great part about it is that we, both using our natural gifting, we always end up in the same spot. And I just think God's brilliant that he would bring those two things together. Like, I'm floating off of emotion and that kind of stuff, and discernment. I'm an artist, things to me are very impressionable, like abstract in my art. So I'm really way out there. And, and I just fascinated by his little tiny detail and how he takes it all. And appreciating the differences that you have between you instead of resenting them. You don't want to marry yourself. It won't help you.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
How about you? Don't you love it? Because they see things so differently?
Yeah, no, it definitely has it definitely has its benefits for sure. I mean, there's times where it's like, I wish you saw it like me to be But no, there's definitely benefits to somebody seeing things in a different way, for sure. That's how you grow and be challenged.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say to women out there who are looking for the dream man? If someone was to sit down right this here and say, Vicky, I'm looking for a dream man. He has to be ABC XYZ 1 2 3. What would you say to somebody who had that entire list of what their dream man must look like?
I'd probably pray before I said anything. I'd say, do you really think and believe that you know what you need more than God does? Because in the middle of all this, at the end of the day, you're going to want to be in agreement with God. And I know for a fact that when you marry someone that wasn't on your heart, it's kind of a nightmare. And you regret it because you didn't really listen. I remember asking God, is this the man I'm to marry? He's not perfect. And I'm not either. The reason Dan wanted to get married was so we could have children. I found that very odd. You want to marry? Yeah, you wanted to marry me and then have kids right away. And it was like, I was 26. I was 25 when I was 26. And it was get married and we had a baby in the first year. And that's exactly
What you wanted.
what he wanted. Yeah. It was kind of, I mean, I already had my son was 7 when she was born. He said when he saw how my son was, he wanted me to be the mother of his children. And there was something very powerful about that.
Yeah.
I thought it was like amazing that he would have the insight to see that. He didn't know how messed up I was at the time.
He didn't know the full story.
No, he didn't quite get it. He does like that girl.
He just liked the way you looked. That didn't hurt him. Okay, yes, he would say, I mean, in essence, you don't know what you need. Like women they don't know what they need, right? I mean, you can have a whole list, but until you're actually in the game, it's kind of hard to foresee their future. You can't.
You can't because you don't know what's going to be down the road. You may need a man that is extremely good. What if you have a child that has disabilities? You want this man not to be a workaholic or somebody, but you want somebody who's compassionate and knows how to edify and encourage. And so we really don't know what we need. That's a part at the end of the day. Kind of goes around this.
It's like you don't know what you need. And also, by the way, no person should ever be responsible for meeting all of your needs. Right. If that's what you're looking for, then you're not going to find them.
No.
Would you say that because if you look right now at marriage rates, families divorced, I mean, there's more single people than ever. People who are just living into their older years and even passing away single.
Yeah.
Women.
Right.
Do you think that a woman, this is just your opinion, but do you think that a woman can really truly be happy and content by herself?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Some people are created to be single and they're content. I know a man that is extremely content and living, he's a pastor. And he said, I am just not called to be married. I know I'm a person that's called to serve. I know people that are not Christians and they just don't have a desire to put their walls down. They're content. A lot of times they're introverted.
Okay.
They would rather have peace than have chaos or have to deal with another human being. God has created us all differently, and there's not a right or a wrong. It's when we project onto someone else and tell them what they need.
Yeah.
Or what I think you would do really good if you did this. And forget it. You don't know what someone else needs either.
Okay. So you would say you do think it's possible Yeah, for
do.
women, men, whoever to go into their older age and never get married and still be happy and content.
And still had great relationships and great friendships and do things with people, go on trips with people, but they don't need a mate. They just are content. And if you're honest about yourself and about your needs, you can be content if that's what you feel is good. It's not wrong.
Yeah, it's not wrong. I I personally, while I agree with you, I tend to think that is a much smaller percentage than what we actually have.
Okay.
I think there's a big portion. I know of a few off the top of my head who want to be married or who want to have long-term relationships, but it seems to evade them. To me, that's a lot different than just
Oh,
like
yeah.
I legitimately just have no interest in being married. I don't really think about it. It's here and all there. That's a much smaller percentage
Okay.
of
I
people.
believe you. I do
Yeah.
believe you. Because some people are just independent.
Mhm.
They're just happy that way. They'd rather travel by
Mhm.
themselves. Um, and it's the good part about that is they make great friends.
Mhm.
They're usually a little bit more. I love introverts. I love introverts because they have such a depth of,
Mm.
thought and processing and just listening to them fascinates me.
Mm.
And it shuts me up for a while.
That makes sense. What's going on, Demetrius? Good to see you. um, yeah, guys, hit the like button if you're here. Hit that like button. As always, you can show support to both on Cash or Vindication. This has been a fun one. We've been talking a little bit about boundaries, marriage, boundaries in relationships, different ways that women, men, can interact, can communicate, can do things to actually make sure that they're having healthier marriages. What we've discovered in our conversation so far is that even if you didn't grow up with good boundaries, or even if you grew up in a boundaryless home, in her case, even if you grew up you were emotionally unavailable, there are steps that you can take to do better. But it does require accountability. It does require you being honest with yourself and also owning the fact that you might be, guilty. You might be partially guilty, and the problem, it requires self-accountability. And I think another also really good point that she touched upon and continued to reiterate is at the end of the day, no one person out there is responsible for satisfying your needs. Nobody can do that. If you're a woman and you're looking for that dream man that can, dot your I's and cross your T's and just wakes up and just serves you hands and foot, you're not gonna find him. It's not gonna be there long term. Like I literally, it's funny. I actually going back to I was listening to somebody today, and this is a woman now, mid-30s. She has a pretty successful career. And she talked about that. She had had some relationship where he would wake up and he would be like, "What do you want?" He was serving her, he was giving her food. He was always thinking about her. And she was like, after having had that experience now, and this person was always thinking about me, I'm not going to settle for less. That was what she said. Now, the interesting thing is she's saying this as a single woman and they're no longer in a relationship. And my first thought is I'm thinking, okay, if that person was so good, why didn't you stay?
Oh,
Because that's the thing about it. Like, what I've seen sometimes in the dating market is people will have sometimes they'll have these flings
hmm
or they'll have these experiences with these people that have no intention of staying long term. So they'll put on they'll like lay it on super thick. Like you're talking like the best behavior out there. Like they're putting on a front. And if you're dating somebody who's not being their true selves or not being realistic, and you're only interacting with the front, and then that relationship ends, now that's your barometer. Now you're looking at everybody based upon that false expectation of what somebody was doing when they were playing around.
right,
And you're thinking that that's what real relationship is like, and it's not.
right.
So,
No, you're absolutely right. I was
Mhm.
thinking about I was dating someone after my first marriage, and oh, this guy's brilliant at PhD in psychology. Oh my gosh, he did things like didn't watch television. He was a true intellect. Um, he waited on me hand and foot, and believed he asked my dad if he could marry me, and my dad said, "Well, ask her." And, and the answer was, "No, you are an awesome human being." But, let's be honest. I want to say this to the women. Sometimes we just don't want someone who treats us good all the time. because we're not used to it. And that happens in a lot of dysfunctional families when there's especially domestic abuse. You come in and you don't even know you're looking. It's like in a alcoholic codependent, and you just like together, and you're bonded. You just like relate. You feel comfortable. That's not necessarily love either. It's familiarity. It is comfortable.
But you're saying, and you're talking about when you're unhealthy and you haven't done, I guess, your work,
Right.
and you find yourself attracted to toxic people, and because you're toxic and they're toxic, it feels comfortable because that's your environment.
Yeah.
And that being distinctive from being in a relationship that is healthy and you guys are honestly bonding.
Right. And if I had been dishonest with myself about that man who wanted to marry me and send me to college and do all these things, there was not the chemistry. I think marriage requires some chemistry. I think it's part of what God gives us to be attracted to one another.
Yeah.
But if I was strictly going by a list, I mean, he was the perfect man.
But it sounds like he was just too good.
And this is that I think he was supposed to. And you want me to beat you up and bring you flowers? And I thought about that. I said, you could be right.
He told you that?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
He told you, yeah. So he just was too nice. He was, and at that time, you weren't ready for the.
I was too dysfunctional. I couldn't figure out what to do with him. Yeah, like that's too there.
They say nice guys really do finish last, and sometimes that's true, unfortunately. Especially
if you find a really dysfunctional human being.
Yeah, where?
Yeah, you're not. That's really sick. I was so sick. Oh my God.
That's hilarious. You're like, yeah, if you beat me up and bought me flowers, I actually might like you a little bit more, but give you a little bit of edge.
Yeah. You do anything I said. You need to wear different clothes. You got your hair cut too short. You got your hair.
So it was almost too boring because you felt like there was no pushback.
There was no challenge.
There is no challenge.
And I needed a challenge. I didn't really need a challenge, but I was so dysfunctional. I thought I needed a challenge.
Oh, you're honest.
What?
Yeah. This is not the first time I've heard guys complain about the fact that when they treated women nice, they got no play. And then as soon as they become jerks, then all of a sudden they attract all these women. Now, I can't speak for the quality of women that they're attracting, but nevertheless, it is a conversation. Yeah. So shout out to Nelson, counseling with the 1999 on the super chat. Our Keisha wrote it. It says, just came across your channel, love your content, and will definitely support more in the future. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the love and support. Again, guys, if you're here, hit that like button, share this with somebody, comment, pass it along to anybody who you think may find it interesting. This has been a very useful conversation. I think we've been talking about boundaries and just all the things related to that. Quite an interesting story, you guys. If you guys are kind of tuning in late, that's fine. You can go back and catch the replay, but you don't want to miss sort of the information that was passed along. So we're a little past an hour into the conversation, believe it or not.
I can't believe it.
I know. And so I do want to be mindful of your time. I didn't know if you had maybe other things that you wanted to touch on, other things that you think might be good to share.
I guess all I'd want to say to you, ladies, be honest about yourself, to yourself. Pray. And ask God for that man that he's chosen for you. Work really hard on yourself so that when you meet him, you will be a whole person, not a broken person, as whole as you can be at that point. We're always going to continue to grow. Don't try to figure it out like that, lists and stuff like that. Because the truth is, you don't know what you need. You don't know what you're going to need 5 minutes from now, let alone 10 years from now. So be present, be prayerful, be thoughtful, and be truthful. And that's it, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's good. And for those women who feel like they have been working on themselves
Yeah.
and they have done the work and they're still waiting, what would you say to them? If they're like, Vicky, I've done counseling, I've done therapy, I have a car and a house, and I have a 401k, and I'm strong and independent. But what would you say to a woman like that? Because
Okay.
that also exists.
When I met my husband, I had my own house and I had a 5-year-old son. I had a good job. I wouldn't call it a career, but it was a very good job, paid for everything. I was very independent, but I was still very dysfunctional. I mean, I haven't quit working on myself for 42 years, and neither is he. So it's not, you don't ever arrive. When God brings you that mate, you just want to be prepared as much as you possibly can for the day that you become a wife. And then it's really not about the wedding, it's about being a wife. And um, it's a job. It's a really good job, and it's a really beneficial job. It's a thankful thing that you have when you can watch your children be married for 15, 20 years and they're still happily married. It's it's such a blessing. So just be truthful and work and keep working.
Yeah.
Get working, get married, work some more.
Because you're going to need it.
Yep, that's about it.
There's always going to be emotional labor to some extent.
And there's going to be times where he's working on himself and we have to be patient. And there's times we work on ourselves and they will have to be patient. Just make sure that you don't put your husband as your God. He will never be able to meet your needs that way.
Yeah.
That's the danger.
That makes sense. Now that makes so much sense. Well, let me see a few comments in here. Prepared, yeah, aka be pleasant, insightful, motivating. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's kind of this idea right now floating around that women are just supposed to show up and not do anything, not bring anything to the table because they are the table.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're the table. They show up and that's it. They don't need to put any effort in. There's no preparation involved. There's none of that because who they are is enough for the relationship.
And how is that working for you?
It doesn't. It doesn't work.
I mean, people who think so highly of themselves sometimes end up just never being happy. And if we're truthful about ourselves, we all need God. I'm sorry. It's the only answer I can give at the end of the day. Focusing on your relationship. Before all my daughters got married, I told them that they always needed to keep God at the top and then their husband. And like there's this big drop between, it's not God and husband, it's God and husband. And when you do that, you kind of open everything up for your husband to come in and love you in ways that you never knew you wanted or needed. And that when that happens, it's the magic. There's something so amazing about that. I remember the first time my husband took me to Hawaii. And I was very sheltered, so I had never traveled much. I think I went to Iowa once, and that was about the extent of my Disneyland in Iowa in 25 years. So he took me to Hawaii, and I never knew that I would like this, like traveling. And I was like in the bathroom, I'm crying and I'm thanking God. And it was like this amazing bathroom that was like cut into rock. It was just, the whole place was so beautiful, little on the outside. But when you open up to God and say, you meet my needs, you are going to get blessed beyond measure because you're not telling God what you need. He's giving you what you need. And that's true for your husband to actually have the freedom to come and say, dear, I made this for you. And that's just the best. Isn't it?
No, it's fun stuff. Fun stuff. So, well, anyways, this has been fun. Let me see. I say, ironically, that part of YouTube keeps calling everyone narcissist when they act like narcissists the most. Yeah, no, that's true. That's a big term right now, is everybody being a narcissist. Like, and it is a real thing, but sometimes it can be almost overused. So you kind of have to.
You have the codependent and the narcissist. So it's kind of like everybody's a little bit both.
That's true.
And working on yourself doesn't make you a narcissist. Must. Yeah.
No worries.
Okay.
Well, this has been good. Like I said, we're a little past the hour, so I think yeah, you touched upon some really, really, really good stuff. Again, guys, for those of you who are hopping on a little late, be sure to go and catch the replay. There were some really, really great points that were mentioned. I mean, really, to just sum it up, as she said before, at the end of the day, boundaries are important. Boundaries require both the man and the woman in the relationship to be established and to work on it. Like, emotional labor is just a part of the relationship. There's never going to be a time that you can avoid that. There's never going to be that perfect dream man or woman that meets all of your needs. And if you think they are, well, then just wait long enough and they will disappoint you. Like,
it's not a white horse and shining. I mean, I put my husband up there and then he fell off that horse.
Yep.
And it was terrible. I was like, oh God, I thought this was my answer. No, that really happened to me. I thought he was there for that. And the best thing ever happened to me is when I let him come down.
Yep.
And be a human being.
And not God.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, women set themselves up for failure sometimes when they're looking for that dream man that does not exist. Even to your point, even if they do check literally every single box on the paper on the list, you get to know that person long enough, and they're going to disappoint you. That's a part of the process.
And sharing really important goals, belief systems.
Yeah,
that's extremely important. We didn't catch on that, but
yeah, that could maybe be another conversation. But for sure, having unified goals and belief. Yeah, it's like, we don't want to be an atheist married to somebody who feels like they're called to be a missionary. But that'd be so just like basic stuff. But
that'd be really scary.
Yeah. So yeah, so no, this was good. This was fun. I appreciate you for sharing all of your stuff. I know we're gonna have to wrap this up.
Okay.
But this has been fun. So
thank you.
Thank guys, and tune in for upcoming conversations. Happy